Good evening, everybody. This is Mike Monty, one half of Long Island's number one pro wrestling broadcast. We're produced out of Indie Music TV in New York. That's Ron Conkema, New York. Yes, again, that's Indie Music TV. You could also catch us on RTF Sports Network. That's RTF Sports Network, the number one growing streaming sports network on the air today. Catch us every Thursday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Yes, we're their anchor show. And catch our rerun on a morning drive time from 10 to 11 a.m. You could also catch us on the Monty and the Pharaoh YouTube page, the Facebook Live Monty and the Pharaoh page, Twitch TV Monty and the Pharaoh page, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, or any streaming network. We're on it. You can find us anywhere. Also catch us on New York Cable, Channel 115, every Tuesday from 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Also catch us Saturday mornings on Channel 115 from 6 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. And catch us Saturday morning at 1:30 a.m. on Channel 20. Soon we'll be coming to Amazon, so catch us there also. We want to thank everybody for the support. And again, please catch us every Thursday, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m., Monty the Pharaoh, Long Island's number one pro wrestling broadcast, new, old, endangered, and let's have a little fun. Talk to you soon.
mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Hey, check out my new tag team, baby, Monty and the Pharaoh.
Hey, Jimmy, don't forget to tell them about Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast.
Well, you know what, I would, but you already did it.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh. With Monty and Pharaoh.
The Monty and Pharaoh Show.
Monty and Pharaoh, bro.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Monty and the Pharaoh.
The Monty and Pharaoh Show.
And you're watching the Monty and Pharaoh Show.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
With Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh.
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 Monty and Pharaoh.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh.
And Monty and the Pharaoh. Oh, is it Monty and the Pharaoh?
Yeah.
Monty and Pharaoh.
The Monty and the Pharaoh Show.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
To the Monty and the Pharaoh Show. And it's Monty and the Pharaoh, baby.
Watching Monty and the Pharaoh.
With Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Oh, what a run.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Hey, cut the fucking music. When you want the best in professional wrestling, Long Island, there's only one place you're going to get it, right here.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Now, that's not just the coolest, and that's not just the best. That, my friends, is just incredible. Monty and the Pharaoh.
You've got the future Hall of Famer, that rocker, Marty Jannetty, MJ in the house, and I'm sitting here with two more future Hall of Famers, Monty and the Pharaoh. We're doing that stuff and we gonna rock it.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Duh.
Welcome to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast out of Indie Music TV here in Ronkonkoma, Long Island, on a special Monday edition of Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh. To the right is the star of the show, Mr. Jimmy Pharaoh. Jimmy, how are you, sir?
Very good. Got me out of bed for a Monday. Good job, Mike.
It feels like it's been a while since we've been in studio, right?
Yeah, it has been a while because Matt was hanging out at Jersey Shore with Snooki.
Yeah, I was checking out. Matt, how'd you do at the Jersey Store, brother?
Did all right.
You did okay?
With Snooki.
Just
Hooked up with some of them Jersey girls?
What?
Unfortunately, not this time. There's really no one over there right now.
Squeededs?
Well, that sucks.
The heck is Squeededs?
I would like to thank the band that sings the theme song for Monty the Pharaoh, our own Jimmy Pharaoh, along with his partner Bart Griggs, a part of the band Wisteria Hall. Wisteria Hall sings such great songs as their new song, Riding High, the theme song of Monty the Pharaoh,
still the man.
In My Dreams, This Life, Not Far Behind, and Here Comes the Rain. You can find their music on Spotify, iTunes, and Reverb Nation, or where music is sold. Monty the Pharaoh can be seen on YouTube, the Monty the Pharaoh page, Facebook Live, the Monty the Pharaoh page, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor, Twitch TV, Monty and the Pharaoh page, RTF Sports Network, their anchor show every Thursday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., and the replay at 10 a.m. on Mondays to 11 a.m. Also catch us on cable channel 115 every Tuesday, the reduced version.
Reduced?
I always use that.
Why do you do that? That's completely
8:30 to
inaccurate.
9 p.m. And for early risers on channel 115 from 6 a.m. to 6:30, and on channel 20 Friday morning at 1:30 in the morning, right?
The abbreviated version.
The abbreviated
Thank
version,
you.
where you will see our special
Reduced.
guests, Mr. Andrew Anderson and Kevin Sullivan, who are in studio. Before we get to those gentlemen, we'll be right back after this commercial break.
And APB, American Protection Bureau, voted #1 best on Long Island for all your security needs. Call 631-390-9050. That's 631-390-9050. APB. That's right, folks. Canine Corral. For all your dog daycare and overnight care, call 631-549-1544. That's 631-549-1544.
You need a body shop? You need engine repair? Auto Excellence, Collision Specialists, 631-261-6420. That's 631-261-6420. Auto Excellence. All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and Faro, and we want to welcome two pro wrestling superstars, two icons in the industry, Mr. Andrew Anderson, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Did I tell you I would bring the legendary Prince of Darkness? That I would bring the Taskmaster, the Games Master? He's known by many names, but the best way to address him is the devil.
The devil.
Kevin Sullivan.
Kevin Sullivan, an icon in the world of professional wrestling. Thank you for gracing us.
No, thank you for having me, guys.
Unbelievable.
I certainly appreciate it. And being on the #1 wrestling podcast, and it's something else. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
And Andrew, you always come through, brother.
Listen to me, man. I love you guys. You guys are my boys, man.
So you know how Farrow's a big wrestling fan, man.
Yep.
When he heard Kevin was coming in, marking out
man.
all the way.
I did.
It's Kevin
Yeah,
Sullivan.
I did. And now that I've met the devil's really cool.
Before we get into stuff,
Yeah.
tell Kevin how you got into Kevin Sullivan.
Oh, my God. Well, it goes back to that funny thing called UHF.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, it goes back to UHF, and I remember Florida, and I remember PWI, and there was something even though I was like limited in my access to Kevin Sullivan, being back in the the early cable days where you only really had Channel 9 at midnight. You know, the Georgia Championship Wrestling wasn't even happening yet. You know, but through the mags, Kevin was larger than life. I always felt like Kevin was the very beginnings of these dark characters, like the Bray Wyatts we see today.
And then you go to UHF channels and you cut Florida Championship Wrestling.
Of course.
And that's
course.
That's
Florida heavyweight champion over there.
Yep. Your long-time relationship with the devil began.
Yeah, very much so. The UHF,
it happened
absolutely.
to me too, kid.
Yeah.
It happened to me. I mean, I remember watching Kevin run out and Spike Blackjack Mulligan and Kevin, J.J. Dillon, Ron Bass, Buddy Colt, Gordon Soley, Brian Blair, the Mulligans.
So let me ask you,
Dusty.
Andrew, right? You guys work together often now.
Yes.
We'll get into that.
Yes.
But being a wrestling fan growing up, right, and then growing up and watching this icon.
Yeah.
How do you avoid marking out?
Yeah, listen.
Avoid?
This is how I avoid marking out. When he sits in the car with me, and he just goes ahead and starts telling me the stories. And a lot of the boys I know, like I'm friends with Barry Windham, I'm friends with all these guys now, and JJ, and I knew Jack Mulligan and Jack Windham, but to hear the stories, the behind the scenes stuff now. Now I know the aged wrestlers, how they are now, you know, and I watched them growing up, and they heavily influenced me as he did. And as you know, him, Jimmy Snuka, Superstar Billy Graham, you know, even Greg Valentine, my relationship with Nikolai Volkov, a lot of the relationships that I've created, and to have a long-term relationship and to travel the world with Kevin Sullivan was just amazing. And every time there's always a new story, or there's an old story with a little twist that I haven't heard before, that I've heard again. I've heard some of the stories I've heard, because, you know, Kevin gets a little redundant, you know. but I've heard the stories, but he always comes up with something added to the story, or how that story came into play. And then there's a story in the story that I haven't heard before, which leads to another story, which makes it total endless entertainment and education. Even after 26 years in this business, I'm still learning.
And you know, you said, how does Andrew do this and not marking out for me? It's not only goes one way, it goes two ways. I was a power lifter, and I mark out for Andrew. Anybody that bench pressed 225 pounds 74 times. I mean, I was a power lifter. I squatted 825 pounds at 242. And when I was 61, I deadlifted 600 pounds. I can't imagine what he did, so I mark out for him. It's an equal respect here, and I the thing about Andrew is Andrew was born 15 years too early. Andrew would have been a huge star across the territorial days. He would have been, knocking on the door of the NWA champion. He would have been the Florida champion, the Georgia champion, all that. So, and the other thing about Andrew, he is braggadocious sometimes as he comes off, and he's got the greatest personality of all the people I know. He's very, very respectful for our era, and a lot of people aren't. And the thing about Andrew, he wants to learn. Even in these days, Andrew should be working at a major company. And the problem is, and this is going to get me a lot of heat, the people writing these shows have no idea what they're doing. And I mentioned to you off camera that the three smartest guys I ever met, if they had seen Andrew, he would have been on top everywhere. Those three guys promoted.
Who were the three smartest guys?
Three smartest guys I ever met in my life was Eddie Graham, who was actually the booker for Vince McMahon Sr. The second one would be Jim Barnett. People don't understand. National TV, that we think about when national TV happened, it happened in Turner, right? 17. It happened 20 years prior to that in Chicago with Fred Kohler, who was an NWA member, and that was played every Monday and Wednesday night. But there became another NWA promoter in Chicago and played on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and his name was Schwartz. Jim Barnett had control of both of those, and Jim worked with Vince Sr., but Eddie was booking the finishes. And when I was a young boy, I was lucky enough to go to Eddie and learn under Eddie. And a few years later, when I was, still green as grass, I'd be in St. Louis because I was working Kansas City, and Pat O'Connor brought me in, the great Pat O'Connor, the NWA champion, brought me in Kansas City and said, come here. This is when we had payphones, right? He said, I want you to call Eddie. I got to get a finish for this main event. And I called Eddie, and I'd say, Eddie, I'm here in St. Louis, and Pat wants to talk to you. He didn't give me the finish. I was a peon to that. But I had the number to call wherever Eddie was, and Pat would, hey, say, Eddie, we have Holly Race against Dory Funk Jr. tonight, and we want to work a return. What are we going to do? And ultimately, the finish that Eddie gave, they did in St. Louis. It was the same thing in New York when Bruno was wrestling, we'll say Koloff. He called, Vince didn't have me call, but I was sneaky enough to listen to the conversation. Eddie, I have them booked for 3 shows back to back. What should I do on the first one? Eddie gave it. And Jim was the first guy never to have territories. He had cities. Jim owned part of Los Angeles. He owned Vegas. He owned Salt Lake City. He owned Colorado Springs. He owned Denver, Lexington, Louisville, part of Chicago, and part of Boston. Part of New Orleans, and part of San Francisco. So between the 3 of them, I got to be very lucky because I sat under Eddie's learning tree because I became the surrogate son when him and Mike had fallen out. Mike and I were dear friends. And then when I was working for Vince Sr., he used to do his TV in the arena in Philadelphia where the original Rocky was filmed. And everybody had gotten there early, and there was no big honchos in the room. And I went to his book, and I looked, and he had Hanson 3 matches. I turn over. This is the guy. Two matches for Brody. 1 match for Crush and for Do. Then I look at, he walked in. I thought I was going to be told to hit the bricks, and he said, "You like what you see?" I said, "I have no idea what I'm seeing." He said, "You want to learn?" And he said, "Come on, sit down beside me." When I sat down beside me, I had instant heat. And, they didn't want a young kid like me learning that end of the business.
What do you think made Vince Sr. trust you so quickly?
Because of Eddie. Because my relationship with Eddie. And the unique thing was because I didn't start there. I was a local boy and didn't start because there was great local talent like Johnny Rods. When Johnny went to L.A. and was Java Rook, he drew nothing but money. Vince didn't like... It wasn't that he didn't like local guys, but he used those great local talents on the mid and lower cards, but he brought in people on the top. I had worked for Vince on a couple of weeks on my vacation when I used to go home to Boston, and he would put me over in the little towns, so they got to know me a little. But I think it was because of Eddie. It was. My job was I beat the guys that Bruno had wrestled on the way out, like Sparasarion, other guys like that, Crusher for Dude, Blackwell. On the way out, I beat them, and I would do the job for Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody, because I think Eddie talked to him and said the kid knows his position. And I understood what my position was. My position was to be there, learn, and also learn the business, not just the wrestling business, but the manipulation of the wrestling business. And with Jim, Jim and I had a love-hate relationship for years because Jim would get so upset at me sometimes because he would tell me, like, I was on the 4th match in the Omni and there was 3 more matches, and I would give it 110%. And he called me in and said, great match. And I said, thank you. And he said, there's 3 more matches above you. What were you doing outside on the floor? I said, well, I was trying to get some heat and let the guy get heat. He said, they're going out on the floor on the main event. They've seen it already. You know, and he'd eat me out. And then one of the funniest times I ever had with Jim was when we were I was in 1980 where we boycotted the Olympics. I was teamed with Tony Atlas, and I was wrestling Ivan Koloff and Alexis Smirnoff. And I got called up to the office at the Omni to see Barnett. I said, this is either going to be very good or very bad. So as I walked up, and I said, what's going on, Jim? He said, I'm going to do my best Barnett impression. Kevin, my boy, you've done it again. Jane Kennedy called. Do you have a thing with Jane Kennedy? Tell me now. I want to know all about it. I said, no, I've never talked to her. Oh, you have. She's called you. So she got on the phone and said, we're going to film this match tonight because I saw you and Tony Atlas have an interview, and it was the first time we ever saw an interview that was positive in wrestling. And the interview was the week before we wrestled Koloff and Smirnoff. I took a black Cub Scout and put him on my knee. Tony took a white Cub Scout, and I said, there's no north, there's no south, there's no east, there's no west, there's just America, and we got to beat these Russians. And that night, all across the regular news, it showed us beating the Russians, and Jane Kennedy said, there's no Olympics tonight, but the Americans beat the Russians in the Olympics tonight, and it was Sullivan and Tony Atlas. So
that's great.
Yeah, and Jim understood what that meant. That it was not only they didn't do it tongue in cheek. They did it as this was a professional sport. And that's what those three guys had in common. When they hired Gordon Soley was a race car announcer, and Mike heard him, and he said, I like this guy, Dad. And he came to Gordon and said, would you like to do wrestling? And he said, yeah. He said, you're going to present this as a professional sport, no tongue-in-cheek, and the day you do it, you're gone. And Gordon Soley, to me, is the greatest announcer of all times.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
In this studio, he is too.
You mentioned
Absolutely.
you mentioned Mike Graham twice.
Yeah.
Mike seemed to be really intelligent. Number two, you mentioned he's a very close friend of yours. Did you know Mike was having the problems he was having when that all went down?
Yeah. Unfortunately, you put it together after the fact. Mike had a podcast, and it was the 13th podcast he had, and he called me. And I did his podcast, and Mike and I were close. We were just practically raised together. We were kids. We were 20 years old together. And Mike was very, very tough. I mean, I wrestled Mike amateur. First time I got there in Florida, his dad talked to me. He says, have you had any amateur wrestling ability? He said, yeah. I said, yeah. He said, come down to Hiro Matsuda's tomorrow. I want you to work out with Mike. I was smart enough to hold my own, but I was smart enough to realize the kid had to go over. And he respected that. And when I left the territory, Mike would fly himself in. He would have, but the promoters would pay for it. And Mike would go around every territory I ever worked for after I left Florida and put me over in the middle of the ring. Wow. And that was something. And after the 13th, and we had a love relationship, but we never said, hey, I love you, man, like I do to Andrew and hug him. After I did the podcast, he called me back and said, man, you know I love you. And I said, yeah, I know you love me, Mike. He said, no, you know I really love you. And I said, yeah, I know that, Mike. He said, I love you. And he hung up the phone. And my wife and Mike were good friends. And I told her what she said. She said, there's something wrong. I could tell you stories about the three of us and going out and partying. She said, you better call him again. And I called him up and I said, you okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. His son had just committed suicide like a year later. His wife told me he's wearing his son's boots. I thought, this is not good, you know what I mean? I should have done more. I feel like I have been a victim of suicide in my family with my father. I felt like maybe I should have done more with Mike, should have gone there. And you got to realize this, not many people know this. Mike committed suicide with a gun. His father committed suicide with a gun. His son committed suicide with a gun. His grandfather committed suicide with a gun. And his uncle committed suicide with a gun. Wow. So it runs in the genes. And I don't have many regrets in life, and I don't think you can look back like Satchel Paige. I'm a huge baseball fan. You know, Satchel Paige once said, can't look back, something may be gaining on you. But of all the things I feel like I should have looked back on was that one.
All right, with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Jimmy, I got to take a dump.
What?
No, I mean I need a dumpster.
Well, for all those needs, you need to call Big V Dumpster Rental, Long Island, New York, 631-900-DUMP.
In the mood for a freshly roasted cup of coffee? www.offtherailscoffeeroasters.com.
The Monty and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. Monty and the Pharaoh, seen only here out of Indie Music TV in Ronkonkoma, New York. Our special guest, superstar Andrew Anderson, and icon Kevin Sullivan in studio. Kevin, I feel for you. That was a tough story.
That was deep.
I've never told that story ever.
Yeah. Hey, if I can be honest real quick, I don't know what you were supposed to really do.
I don't know either.
What on earth were you supposed to do? I mean, genetically, like you spoke of, it was, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
What do you got, Mike? Anyway, so Andrew, real quick question for you then. So, Kevin said you were born a little too early, right? You thought, Kevin? You said early?
Yeah.
I kind of, when I look at you, I'm like, I always felt he was born maybe 15 years too late. Like, I felt like Kevin, Andrew's got the size, he's got the mic skills, right? He's a good wrestler. And I always thought, like, if he, like, was born, like, was, 20-something years old in the 70s.
Oh, I can see it.
He would be like an instant
man, can I
beast.
see it?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
I can see it.
Exactly.
It's right there.
Kevin said that repeatedly.
It's right there.
Tony Atlas has said that repeatedly.
Yeah. Oh,
Tito said that repeatedly.
Yeah. With a guy like him managing you.
Yeah.
I ask you, Andrew.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Utmost respect.
Yeah.
Why do you think that you just never hit the...
Because I'm old school. I'm too old school. I mean, look, I've
too old school combined with timing? Like,
I don't think it was more timing. I think it's always been the fact that somehow, some way, that door never opened. You know what I'm saying? Once the door would start to open, and guys, first I was told I was too small. Then I was told I was too big. Okay. Then I was told to cut your hair short.
What?
Then I was told to get lifts in my boots. Then I was told to bleach my hair blonde.
Hey.
It was like I was getting jerked around. Like I became the everybody told me, the promoters said, you got to be a Russian. Put me in the business in my rookie years with Nikolai Volkov, which was great. Listen, I have no regrets. I wouldn't change a goddamn thing. I've lived the life 100 people on the planet haven't lived the life I had, done the things I have done, partied with everyone like Kevin said. I partied with rock stars. I partied with royalty. I have met everybody, politicians to paupers. You know, it's been great, but I wouldn't change anything. But it was always like they put me with Nikolai, and they made me a Russian. And I remember Mikey Nova telling me after an ECW show, after an ECW show and a Jersey All Pro Wrestling show, saying, "What are you doing? The Cold War's dead." He goes, "You're an Anderson. You got to be an Anderson. Look at you." And that's how it changed. It changed. And that was in about 1997, 98, and I think 98. You know, and it changed. And it was just, and then occasionally you had the promoters who still wanted me to do the Russian. I'm teaming with Nikolai. They wanted to make sense of it all. You know, some promoters wanted to keep me where I was at the last time I was working. Like if I worked for a promoter named Mike Dano, he always wanted to book me as a Russian. Team me with Nikolai. You know, or put me in the main event of the Pepsi Center of a WWE Legend show against King Kong Bundy, you know. So I was always caught in that loop. So it was almost like I was caught in a paradoxical loop. But it doesn't bother me. Look, look who I'm friends with. Look at the stories I hear, and look at the guys I work with now, and the things I've done.
But I'm going to interrupt here if you don't mind. You know, the three guys I mentioned, and one of the smartest guys in the wrestling business I left out is Terry Funk. If I was the booker and I was in Florida and he came in the door and Eddie would look at me and say, "What are you going to do with him?" And if I said, "Well, I'm going to have him against this guy that's a jumping bean, and the jumping bean's going to beat him," Eddie would say, "You know what? Why don't you pack up your bag because you've lost it." If he went to Amarillo, Terry would have made him a madman to work against him because he's so big.
Yeah.
He's legitimate. Last night we were at a show, and I wanted to bring this up. I'm watching Andrew. I was there for the autograph session, but I wanted to watch Andrew wrestle. And it was him and Tokyo Once against these two other guys who were big like these guys. And a police officer said to the promoter, "It's finally good to see guys that look like wrestlers."
Yeah, amen.
And I wanted the promoter to understand. So I said, "Officer, will you tell me what you just said again and tell him?" He said, "It's finally good to see guys that look like pro wrestlers and they're big, that you'd be afraid of them."
Yeah.
And this is not to knock anybody, okay? This is not to knock anybody.
I'll do it for you, so go ahead.
At my age,
You will.
if the four of us went out to a bar and we had a little buzz on and we had some Jamesons, and we were walking down the street.
Yeah, I like Jameson.
And we took a left-hand turn, and Brock Lesnar was walking down one sidewalk, and Orange Cassidy is walking on the other sidewalk. I'd say, "Excuse me, guys, I'm going on that side."
I'd be right behind you.
And I know.
He's got his hands in his pockets. He's dangerous.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Oh,
but I'm going at this is, I knew wrestling was prearranged when I was a kid because I had wrestled from 8 years old. I was state champion. I wrestled in the New England's 3 years in a row, and I came in second. The guy I lost to for 3 years in a row became the NCAA champion. Okay. I knew you couldn't take a guy by his hair and bail him out of a corner.
You can't?
And I used to watch the wrestling and go to it because I enjoyed seeing the guys, and I was willing to check my disbelief at the door when I bought a ticket.
Sure.
The Sheik came to town.
Oui.
I'm sitting there, and he came out, and I felt the building move. I said, "I don't give a shit if that's all fake. That guy's real."
Yeah.
I said, "That guy's real." Mm-hmm. Years later, he became one of my dearest friends in pro wrestling. I almost got my big tattoo of the Sheik on my arm. Thank God I didn't when he hired me, right? Oh, thank you for paying me. Yeah, he said your pay's cut in 1/3, you know what I mean? But we understand it's an art form, but we're insulting the people's intelligence. I don't mean to get on anybody's ass, but when I was a kid, at the time I was only 5'8", but I was 252. I squatted 825 pounds. I was a power lifter. I was a bodybuilder.
You were a beast, dude.
I
remember you were
I was
a
beast. But I was also a magician. I worked with Andre quite a bit, and I didn't realize how much I worked with him until I looked at a book that said Florida Championship Wrestling from 70 to 85. What I used to do was I used to send a bottle of Crown Royal over to Andre before I worked with him. And Andre and I were good friends, and I'll tell you how we became good friends. But Andre one night came down to Orlando. It's the only time I ever fell out of character. He came down, and my deal was when I wrestled Andre, I got to the ring first. He came down. I attacked him, dove through the ropes, attacked him. I didn't dive. I jumped and attacked him. And I posed him, and that night he got blood for me. And I was on top of him, beating the shit out of him. And this old lady who had those crow fingernails ran her fingers down my back, and brother, it hurt so bad. I went, oh! And I turned around and I said, will you sit the fuck down?
Oh, my God.
I'm 5'8", 250. He's 7'4", 550 pounds. He's going to kick my ass sooner or later.
Quit picking on the big guy.
Yeah, so what we would do with that was we'd stay on the floor for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I beat him pillar and a post, but he was always down. Finally, he'd make that comeback where he punched me a few times, threw me in the ring, and when he stepped over the ropes, I made sure I was on my knees. So the height difference like that, and I would go, no,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'd go home. It was a magician act. I saw Siegfried and Roy before they died. The one died. When he put the sheet over the white Bengal tiger and then appeared in the third balcony, I knew there was a magic act, but they didn't tell me how they did it. They didn't say, oh, after that, it would be like me saying, after I took a shit, I grabbed this bunny and I wiped my ass with the bunny. That's why the bunny's brown.
So let me ask you this then. You bring up a great point, right? You were able to play big. Guys like Piper, right?
Yeah,
Piper, what did Piper weigh? 210?
Maybe.
Wow, Savage.
Really?
Savage, right?
Wow.
Maybe 210?
Maybe.
Pre-Savage,
Yeah,
right?
and-
Pre-Juice Savage.
Savage and I used to go to bodybuilding contests, and we were down to almost nothing.
So here's my question. These guys played so big. When Piper wrestled Hogan, you believe Piper could beat Hogan.
Yeah.
Why can't today's wrestler play big?
I think they're trying to do too much. They're trying to do too much. If you look at Piper would throw those punches, and who was attacking you. He was attacking you. And you're saying, wow, he's vicious. He didn't give you time to say, hey, he's 205 pounds. You know what I mean? I was in Florida for 3 years, and the guys I wrestled most of the time were Dusty Rhodes, Blackjack Mulligan, who was 6'7", Barry Windham, the greatest babyface I ever worked with, Andre the Giant, and Superstar Billy Graham. And they were nice enough to do the right thing to get me over. People actually thought that I was superhuman.
Yeah.
And the other thing they did was when I got my shoulders pinned and they got up and stumbled around the ring, I got my heat back. I made sure that I could do a job every night, but the next week it was, it's going to be a taped fist match. The week after that, he's going to be in a cage. He's going to finally get his comeuppance. And that's the difference today is I don't think, and I hope I may be talking out of turn. If I insult anybody, I don't want to. But one of the things Vince McMahon taught me was, when I looked at his book, he had January and he had December booked, the top 3 matches.
Wow.
My wife is an author, and I asked her, how do you do a book? She said, you got to get the ending first, and the beginning comes second. I think they're doing not only the beginning, but week by week by week, and they're not sticking with someone if it doesn't work.
Well, to be fair, and I'm not defending what's happening,
Right.
you have a different audience now.
Right.
With all due respect, we talk about this all the time. I grew up in Madison Square Garden, Backlund, Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
You could, the Backlund Morocco match would get booed out of the arena now.
Right.
You know, my opinion, right? And as much as I loved it.
And Morocco was one of the most versatile, greatest heels of all time.
Some of the greatest, listen, I'm a WWE guy, grew up a WWE guy or WWF guy. But when you watch, today's audience couldn't stand for it.
No,
and
but
it's hard to be a writer.
The attention span's not there.
But can I interrupt you about that? Underneath that, they had Dusty and Superstar, the bull rope match. I'm sweet too sour. Look at the 22-inch pythons. And Dusty, I'm the working man, brother. I'm the working man, brother. I'm going to kick his ass, brother. Who went to see Morocco against Backlund? They went to see Superstar against Dusty.
Yeah.
They built that thing around. I could tell you a story, and I don't know if I should, but I will.
All right, that's what I want to hear.
You know how Backlund became champion?
Go ahead, hit us with it. Well, I will tell you this. What I do know is that Vince called
Eddie
and said, "Hey, Eddie, I'm looking for a baby."
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. You're
and then he goes,
absolutely
"Hey, I got this guy Bob Backlund." He said,
No.
Okay, you got it. It's on you now."
I'm there. I was a surrogate son.
Okay.
I fished. Do you think this was a tough job? I'm Mike Graham's partner and his best friend, and his father's flying me to towns, and Mike is driving. Okay?
Yeah.
Because I knew a secret that nobody else knew, except Terry Funk and Jim Barnett.
And Monty and the Pharaoh in about 1 minute.
Yeah. So, Eddie calls me one day and said, let's go fishing. We used to fish a lot. He said, let's go fishing. Be in the office at 11 o'clock. I come up, 11 o'clock. I'm talking. He said, let's go. Phone rings. The story you just said is exactly the truth. But Eddie says, no, the guy you want, because his tag team partner was Steve Kern. He said, the guy you want is Steve Kern. Wow. Because his dad was a war hero. He was a prisoner of war twice. So you were that in World War II and in Vietnam. You know what his job was in Vietnam? To see how close a missile could get to a plane.
Holy cow.
He spent 5.5 years with John McCain in prison, right?
That was reasonably safe.
He said, you need to go with Kern because Kern's a better speaker.
Wow.
Okay?
So he's looking for someone, and is he looking for Backlund?
He's looking for Backlund because he's watched the TV.
Gotcha, but he's like, no, Kern's the guy.
Kern's the guy because they were tag team partners.
Understood.
They were the Florida tag team champions. And Eddie said, no, Vince, I think you're making a mistake. And he said, Eddie, I'll get him over. He said, you're going to have a hard time getting him over. Kern is instant heat with the father. You get a foreign heel, talk about his father, big deal. He spent 9 years as a prisoner of war. America is the shits, okay? He said, I guarantee I'll get him over. And he said, no, I don't think you will. He said, Eddie, I'll bet you $100 I will. He said, okay, the bet's on. You remember what you said about Morocco and Backlund?
Mm-hmm.
Do they stack the cards? Pedro, Bruno.
You're right.
Superstar, Dusty,
listen,
from the beginning, Snooker.
Yeah. Those every card was stacked with Backlund.
So you mean to tell me, because we spent 5 or so years of our junior high school hating Bob Backlund, we could have had Steve Keirn as a villain coming in?
We could have had Steve Keirn as a babyface.
As a babyface. Oh, okay.
So let me ask you this: in your opinion, knowing what you know now,
that would have been weird.
Should Steve Keirn have become WWF champion?
I think knowing what he knows now, Superstar Billy Graham should have never lost that belt.
The difference was, I love Steve Keirn. He's one of my dearest friends. We grew up, him, me, and Mike. Nobody at that period was as charismatic as Superstar Billy Graham. The greatest interviews of all times. My greatest interviews, my list is King Curtis. There's nobody that topped King Curtis, okay? Everybody stole for King Curtis. Then it's Superstar Billy Graham, Dusty Rhodes, Blackjack Mulligan, and Hulk Hogan. Superstar should have turned babyface against Ivan Koloff, Stars and Stripes.
But I ask you then, you said your top 3, Vince Sr. was in your top 3 smartest guys.
Right.
Why didn't Vince Sr. have the foresight to say, look, Superstar's he's already turning face regardless what's already happening?
Because he was the most honorable man I ever met in the wrestling business. He told Bob the day he came in and the day he was going to win the belt.
Wow.
And in my heart, he knew it was the wrong thing to do for business, but he said, I gave my word, and I'm going to keep my word. And that's why he stacked the cards, because those cards were so stacked, you don't think those guys were getting mid-card payoffs. No. You know what I mean? They were walking out of the gardens with a lot less money for Vince when Bruno was the champion or Pedro was the champion. There was times, like I said, where he had Dusty and Superstar, he had Pedro, he had Bruno.
And he had Andre.
Andre. I mean, he still had Calhoun. He had guys on that card and his underneath cards. And the other thing that he did, and a lot of people forget this, he was bringing in Piper, he was bringing in Flair, when they were brand new guys who were all over those magazines, like you said you guys grew up on.
When he would bring Valentine in, I'd lose my mind.
Okay, so I mean, there it is.
But he would have Flair, and he would have Piper on the undercards.
But here's
a lot of people don't realize that.
So he promises Backlund a belt, right? He keeps his word. Why did he yank it from him? Why did he had it on for like 5 years, right? I think 5 or 6
5 and a half years.
He was trying to get him over.
5.5 years?
No, I don't think he was trying to get him over. I think that there was... People don't realize this. Do you guys recall the incident when Pedro Morales was wrestling Blackjack Mulligan and Blackjack almost got killed? He got stabbed in the ring.
Yeah.
A Puerto Rican rolled in the ring and cut him from the top of his hip to his boot.
700 stitches.
And the guy pissed on the knife, and Jack almost died. I think he said, and you got to realize, back in 1957, the big riot was Rocca and Edward Caponte against Dick the Bruiser and Dr. Billy Graham. That started the 14. You had to be 14 years old or older to get in the gardens. He saw that again coming, and they at this time, they had gone through a huge federal lawsuit on monopoly in the 50s. They didn't want any more under the microscope from the government.
That's really interesting.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then I want to talk about the man that you didn't mention in your top 3, Vince McMahon Jr. We'll be right back. You want to star in your own success? Call QuickCast, www.quickcast.com. 866-7-CAST-NOW. That's 866-7-CAST-NOW. Quick Cast.
Start your own success.
Jimmy, I just got the best hookup on tickets.
Fill me in.
I went to www.seatslinks.com and ordered the best tickets with the best prices.
Call 718-676-0504. SeatsLink, the complete ticket experience.
Tell them Charles sent you.
And Verola Worldwide Logistics for all your logistic needs. Please call 862-227-3670. Once again, that's 862-227-3670. Verola Worldwide Logistics.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and Afaro, with a special Monday edition with pro wrestling superstars and icons, Mr. Andrew Anderson and Mr. Kevin Sullivan. So, Kevin, we broke to a little intermission, but you did not mention Vince McMahon Jr. How do we leave Vince McMahon Jr.'s name out of the greatest, smartest pro wrestling minds in history?
He has to be the greatest mind for wrestling entertainment, not pro wrestling. Have you ever heard the word wrestling on that television program?
Oh, you can't say that. You get in trouble.
You don't talk about wrestling.
Andrew tried to say it the other day. He got yelled at by Vince.
I mean,
you can't say that word.
Vince took it. He took wrestling from a territorial and Connie-like atmosphere and brought it to the big screen. And Jim Barnett, without Jim Barnett, there would never have been a WWE, because Barnett knew everybody that was ever associated with professional wrestling that was a program director. When they looked at their watch, they thought about Jim Barnett, because he gave more Rolexes out to any program directors across the country. So that's how Vince got on it. Vince saw this as, we're going to make this a kiddie show. And rightfully so, he's done a remarkable, remarkable job. But as time has gone along, we used to check it in and say, well, yeah, I know it's fake, but this guy's real. They don't have anybody, this guy's real anymore, because they know, like Brock can be anybody. There isn't two guys you can match up. And this is no disrespect to them. They're worldwide, but it's coming, I believe, with the ratings going down. I had stocks. The stocks are going down. He had the, what was that, football league he had?
The XFL.
There's seems to be a little bit of hanky-panky on money that was invested. I think they're in trouble. I think they're in trouble when you got. And here's, I think, what's wrong is they got so many guys. You don't know who's who. When you were growing up and going to see the Gardens, you knew Bruno, you knew who he was going to wrestle. You knew the entire card. Now, there's so many guys, and they're either gone quickly or they're there forever.
Well, Kev, another factor that you mentioned last night, we were on a virtual signing last night, and we were also had a Q&A. And one of the things that Kevin discussed was one of the reasons why ratings and stuff are down was Kevin had a podcast where Eric Bischoff was his guest. And what did Eric Bischoff say?
This was the smartest thing I've heard in years. I asked Eric, why do you think wrestling's down? He said, CNN and Fox, they're doing wrestling better than we did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's right.
You got the heel.
We got a heel and baby face.
You're right.
It doesn't matter.
Left or right, it doesn't matter.
Right.
People are glued.
They're glued, and I said.
Except I took you guys serious. I don't take either. Never mind.
And I said to Eric, we just miles tie bandanas on our heads, blue and red, Crips and Blood.
Yeah.
That's what we are now.
You're right.
I mean, didn't Trump just say today, I'm flying home to Seattle, which is now a terrorist state. Oregon's a terrorist state, and New York's a terrorist state. I mean, we are building where people have to watch news. And maybe because they're doing it better, let's not forget this either. Trump's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
He's a worker.
I mean, he's working it to the max. And him and Vince are very close. Linda's on the cabinet. There's something going on, and they're doing it better than we did.
When you were in WCW and you were booking, did you guys want to put the WWE out? Did you want to knock them out?
I never did. I never did, because I'm the person that thinks I used to give guys jobs, even if I had to cut their money, because some people didn't understand how good the guys were. I would keep them working enough that they could feed their families. I never wanted to see the WWF at the time go, because those guys, they were on the road 350 days like we were. They deserve to feed their families. Competition is good for the wrestling business. That's when we were at our highest. And it makes you think, okay, I'm against my competitor this week. He must be thinking something very, very good for this week. That's why I used to book a year out. And I could adjust after 3 months where I was going.
Do you think you were one of the best top 3 bookers in the history of professional wrestling?
No. I was just the last to learn, I think. Along with
you were highly successful. Your angles were pretty successful.
Yeah, and one of the things is I brought Paulie into the business, and Paulie became very successful. I think what's happened is I got to learn under the guys that learned, like Eddie learned from Doc Sapolis, who learned from Ed Strangle Lewis, who learned from Lou Thez. It was passed down. But that lineage has been broken. And, I call Terry Funk almost every week, and Terry and I talk about it. And we talk about manipulation. And Terry says, people think manipulation is a bad word. Manipulation is a good word because you manipulate to draw people to come to the buildings. Well, when you say manipulation to this young group, they say, oh, they're carnies, they're trying to work us. No, we're trying to work the audience.
Yeah.
And that was very nice for you to say, but I was like, I would not have been even mentioned like that if I wasn't accepted by the people I was.
You were NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion a few times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
so I got to bring this up because earlier on you mentioned, the difference in size and believability when there's a big guy and a smaller guy in the ring. Is Rey Mysterio the beginning of the small guy pitting the big guy and really pushing that line of believability? Because nowadays you see so many wrestlers wrestle like Rey Mysterio, flipping and flying and flying and flipping, and then they pin a guy his size.
Or bigger.
Is Ray the beginning of that? I don't want to pin it on Ray because he's a legend.
I don't want to cut Kevin off, but in my eyes, from my generation, I thought when that WrestleMania, I don't know if it was WrestleMania 30, when Daniel Bryan subsequently beat Triple H. Mm-hmm. He beat who else? Mm-hmm. Who else did he beat?
Batista, I think, was in that
Batista
match.
And somebody else.
The fans had demanded that. They almost pushed the McMahons into booking that.
He beat 3 of the biggest guys in the business all in one night. I could not fathom that. He's probably one of the greatest technical workers out there right now. He's phenomenal. Trained by Shawn Michaels, I believe.
Mhm.
You know, tremendous athlete, a great guy. I like him a lot. I appreciate his work, but the psychology, whoever booked that, I couldn't understand it.
Yeah, I always go back to the night that Rey
when he beat the
Mysterio
Big
paid,
Show, I said to
pinned,
myself, this is
Big
the
Show.
death of the big man.
Right.
Well, I hate to say this, you know, you're absolutely right. I booked that. I booked Ray. But I was thinking he was going to be the only one because my thought was he was David against Goliath.
When he pinned Big Show.
Yeah, no, not when
Kevin
he
Nash.
finished. When he
Back in WCW.
Okay,
back
that
in
I remember, of course,
WCW.
too. But I remember when he got the world title.
He got the push because he was David against Goliath.
Mhm.
I didn't expect
A
that.
floodgate?
Yeah, the floodgate to open.
So I just put you over as the greatest booker of all time.
Yeah.
and
You
my
see what I
partner,
did?
my
Did you
partner
see what
just called you booking shit.
But he's probably right because that was the beginning of disbelief where you checked at the door.
Can I take a
You
little?
created Orange Cassidy.
Hold on.
No.
Can I take? Wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Let me take a little heat off of him. You didn't book. You didn't book when 1, 2, 3 Kid pinned.
No.
Okay.
No.
It's not all your fault.
No, that was
No, but here's the
Those
difference.
smaller guys.
Here's the difference. Rey Mysterio was so unique at
Yeah,
the
he
time.
was. And he does
At
play
the
big.
time, he was the only guy
Does.
doing the flips. He was the only guy.
It was like
doing,
Spider-Man versus the Hulk.
It was the
And he
only,
plays big, right?
Yeah,
Right?
and he plays
Yeah,
big.
He does.
And it was the only time that they had seen that kind of guy since Argentina Rocca.
Right.
So I
okay.
thought, well,
Okay.
he's the only guy. We're not going to open this up. And then then I left, and it opened up, and
Oy.
it opened up, and opened up, and opened up.
Created Orange Cassidy.
Billy Kidman pinning Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, I did.
So,
I can't.
I'll ask both of you, Andrew, first, if you don't mind. If you pay for wrestling school and you wrestle, does that make you a pro wrestler?
Oy.
What makes a pro wrestler?
That's a hard question these days because you're going to get a lot of people bent out of shape.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm asking.
I think you have to pay your dues. You know, you gotta really. It's tough. You know, I mean, everybody.
I'll answer it.
Go ahead, Kevin. will answer.
He's trying to beat around.
I'm trying to
He's trying to beat around.
There you go, Kev.
Politically correct. I'm old enough not to be politically correct, and if they hate me, they hate me.
There you go.
The guys teaching them never drew a dime. Okay,
Exactly.
as Mike Graham said, never drew a dime, never drew a dime, never
Jeff
drew a
Jarrett
dime.
never drew a dime.
Here, give me a pencil. I'll draw
And
you a
Mike
dime.
was right. You can't have guys telling people how to work to get asses and seats when you never drew a dime.
So, what is a pro wrestler?
To me, a pro, you know, when they say, oh, he's a great technician, he's a great wrestler. A great wrestler to me is the guy that puts an ass in between 16 inches around the arena. If you don't put people to come and see you, you're not a great
So,
wrestler.
if you're on an indie show and they pay you $20, you're not officially a pro wrestler.
No, I don't
no,
think
no.
so. I don't think so. I think you should try to look for a...
It's like
And,
Malone,
and
your-
I'm not
your filler.
knocking anybody because there's some guys that started off that way. But the guy that's running the show, it's his responsibility to look at somebody and say, can this guy draw me more than I'm paying him?
Amen.
Who is the greatest draw in the history of this business, in your opinion?
In this business?
Yeah.
Undertaker, I think.
Undertaker by far.
Undertaker by
yeah,
far.
Definitely.
By far. How long's he been in the business?
Interesting. Okay.
How long has he been in the business?
About 30 plus years.
Every time he
Non-stop.
works, he sells out.
Yeah.
And he never broke character. That's why they paid to see him. He didn't break character until this year. He didn't have a social media thing. You know, no one knew where he lived. There wasn't anything about him. He was the Undertaker 24
And
hours
that's all
a day.
you know. You knew his real name, but that's all you know.
So, I ask you this then. You're with Bischoff. You're booking for Bischoff. How come you guys didn't try to rip Shawn Michaels and the Undertaker away? You could have put the dagger.
Ooh.
You could have finished it.
Yeah, that would have been.
The Undertaker, and I don't know Mark very well.
Okay.
But the Undertaker, I believe, is a very loyal guy. His son is named after Vince. Shawn Michaels knew that if he left, he wouldn't get the money in the long run with Vince by showing his loyalty. They weren't going anyplace, and it always gave their friends a chance to say, well, we'll just go back up there. It was a very smart move, and it was very Machiavellian. I thought they were brilliant guys that did it that way.
Were you upset the night that kayfabe apparently took a death at Madison Square Garden?
Yes, I was.
With the curtain call?
Yes, I was, and I think that the guys did it for maybe the right reason because they loved each other, but they certainly did it for the wrong reason for the fans that paid. It hurt their business, I believe. And Razor and Kevin are very good friends of mine. Very good friends.
I've got 2 comments from fans out there. One, Andrew, Modern Day Warrior, says Andrew Anderson looks like a mix of Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Steve Dr. Death Williams.
Well,
that's quite a compliment.
I appreciate the compliment, but some fan came up to me yesterday. Okay, I'm not going to say some fan. My opponent the other night happened to say to me outside the ring before the match, hey Drew, you look like a combination of Bret Michaels and Fozzie Bear.
That's pretty funny.
I was screw you, Wrecking Bull Legursky.
There's another comment out there. They just want to say, Kevin, you're a genius and an icon in this industry.
Oh, thank you very much, Mom. I appreciate it.
All right,
so left some meatloaf for me when I get home.
We left. we recently came to the studio this year, which we love tremendously. But one of our first guests was Jim Dowse, the original husband of your ex, Nancy. Can you tell us about the day that you heard that Nancy was murdered?
Yeah, I built the largest gym, and it's still the largest gym in the Florida Keys. And Teddy Long called me. And it was one of the saddest days of my life. We had spent 13 years together, and it's like 1 out of 2 marriages fall apart. Our marriage fell apart. We were separated for 8 months. She was a wonderful girl, and the most important thing to her was being a mother. And to this day, her mother and family I still talk to. There's an urn of starfish with Nancy and an urn of her son, her grandson, on her mantle. And I can't imagine her mother and father getting up every morning without them. It's a sad day. It was a sad day.
All right, with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
Can I run and take a leak?
Sure can.
And APB, American Protection Bureau, voted #1 best on Long Island for all your security needs. Call 631-390-9050. That's 631-390-9050. APB. The Monty and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite 4-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah. That's right, folks. Canine Corral for all your dog daycare and overnight care. Call 631-549-1544. That's 631-549-1544.
You need a body shop? You need engine repair? Auto Excellence. Collision Specialists. 631-261-6420. That's 631-261-6420. 6420. Auto Excellence. In the mood for a freshly roasted cup of coffee? www.offtherrailscoffeeroasters.com. Jimmy, I gotta take a dump.
What?
No, I mean I need a dumpster.
Well, for all those needs, you need to call Big V Dumpster Rental, Long Island, New York, 631-900-DUMP. Jeff Quest, graphics design, custom vinyl lettering, and all your art and video needs. 516-317-8204. That's for Jeff Quest, graphic design.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and Farrell.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of Lost in Space moment with Farrell and me.
There's nothing behind the scenes. Anyway, we're welcoming wrestling superstars Andrew Anderson and Kevin Sullivan. You got this one, Farrell, man.
I got this one. Well, Andrew had previously on previous visits to this fine show had mentioned Cuba to us. So I wanted to ask Kevin, because apparently Mr. Kevin Sullivan is behind the arrangements for Cuba. What do we got going on in Cuba, Kev?
Hopefully not another revolution. But you can't tell with Andrew and a few Cuban Libras, I may be president. So you guys better take care of me right now.
He might say the wrong thing in a bar the next thing
yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
Oh, my
God.
God.
We're hoping to bring pro wrestling back to Cuba, which hasn't had it since 1959.
Wow.
So that's when Fidel took over. And Andrew has done an amazing job. The thing about Andrew is you can't judge a book by its cover. I think of myself as a semi-historian, and when I talk about things I think are over people's heads, Andrew beats me to it. And Andrew has gone and done this. We were going to go before the COVID hit.
April 18th?
And it hit, but as soon as we're able to travel, because the Caribbean has locked us down except for, I believe, St. Kitts and St. Croix.
And Jamaica.
No,
Jamaica's locked down.
And the other one is Aruba. So hopefully we'll be able to go, and it will. I'm looking for it to be a big thing, because the people there all have satellite dishes. They've seen wrestling. They've never seen it since 1957, and I'm hoping that we will do really, really well and make it like 4 times a year. It would be great.
This is very nerdy of me, and you know that I would do this.
First, before you even get into it, I want to know why we're not good friends like they are.
What are you talking about?
I'm a little jealous. They're like all nice.
They're not kissing or anything. What are you talking about?
We did before we got he slipped me in the tongue. I can't stand that. His breath is so bad.
Oh my God! Search bad.
So you see, you never know. We might be looking for some color commentators to go opposite the Spanish-speaking crowd over there.
That would be good.
We're raising our hands.
I'm a colorful.
Wait a minute, hold on. I'm going to be a psychic for a second. No, he's not going to get there. Go ahead.
And you know your wrestling spots, and you know your wrestling holds.
That's
your
it,
moves
baby. I'm ready. We're ready.
Yeah, we would plug us right in. But I still have to ask this because the Pharaoh gets kind of nerdy. What was the history of pro wrestling in Cuba before Fidel?
Before Fidel, it was at one time ran by Cowboy Luttrell, who was the precursor of the Eddie Graham.
Okay.
And then after him, a local promoter took over and gave Cowboy Luttrell a booking fee. And he took wrestlers from the Caribbean, and mostly, Hispanic wrestlers. So it was back in the day. I remember, people don't know this, but Florida Championship Wrestling ran Puerto Rico before Carlos Colon.
Wow.
And
Nice.
Jim Barnett actually gave Carlos Puerto Rico.
How did Barnett lose all of his power? It sounds to me like he had his fingers everywhere. What caused Barnett's demise?
He lost his power because even though he was an NWA member, occasionally he would run against an NWA member. And it caused a lot of heat and caused the division. And they decided it'd be better off if Jim left. And Jim sold Detroit to the Sheik and Indianapolis to the Bruiser and went to Australia. And back then, the only thing on Australian TV was government things, sharing sheep,
Sharing sheep.
Yeah, sharing sheep.
And rugby, right?
And rugby and cricket, and then all of a sudden wrestling came and they blew it open. Back in 1972, I was offered, and I was green as grass. I was in Florida, and I was offered $1,000 a week as an opening match.
In 1972.
1972.
For Australia.
Two questions here now that you're mentioning that. Number one, when you came up with that whole satanic...
yeah.
Weren't you nervous about that? Like, you were really stepping over the line?
I never said the word devil.
Right.
I never said, hell. I never said that. And I used to go to church and talk to my priest about it, and he said, in the end, Jesus wins anyway. So, and he was a big wrestling fan. He says, Dusty's Jesus, and he's going to beat you anyway.
Yeah, that's cool.
He referred to the devil as the chairman of the board.
Yeah, and I also used to call Habuda Dean. And Habuda Dean, when I went to Malaysia, I went to the cave temples in Malaysia 2,500 years before Christ, and I got to meet a guy they called him the Sifu, which is like the one that was the enlightened one, and he told me that the word Habuda Din was a fertility god in their religion. So I could guess I got screwed so many times by Dusty. I was Habuda Din.
So you're in the territories. You're an NWA guy. I know the WWE is pretty much the only game in town. I know AEW's new, but everybody says it, but I don't know how true it is but was New York the Mecca? Like, did everybody want to get to New York? Because really, you never went to New York, right? You worked there, but you never really, when you were in your heyday, you never headed that way.
No, I never headed that way because at that time I had a good job in Japan, and I also had a good job in Asia. And I knew these guys were working 350 days a year, and I knew I wasn't going to fit in that clique. So I said, okay, I may not make quite as much money, but I'll be home. I'll be places that I short trips. My main hobby is scuba diving, and I scuba dived around the world. So I've lived a good life. I've never said, oh, I wish I went. You can't look back, as I said before. Regrets. So
you mentioned 350 days numerous times.
Yeah.
Do wrestlers, does Vince McMahon owe wrestlers past pensions and medical? Is it his responsibility to take care of the old timers that can't pay for themselves? I mean, we recently lost Kamala, right? What are your thoughts, both of you guys, on that?
My thoughts on, if I'll go first, Andrew. Yeah. My thoughts of, when I signed a piece of paper that said they had the rights to my television, there was no internet, there was no streaming service. I knew what I was getting into professional wrestling, but the YouTube, the network, I should be getting a shekel somewhere down the line, enough to pay for a sushi dinner once in a while. I think, and I don't think Vince McMahon owes them a lot, but what he's making off of their stuff on the network, he definitely owes them something. I guess some of them get royalties, and then I hear different sides. I mean, it's a giant company. The people that are employees are getting a retirement. Why aren't the wrestlers? Because they're not. If anybody tells me they're independent contractor, they should go to the nearest psychiatrist and check in.
So I ask you this then, right?
Right.
I understand where you're coming from, especially
Right.
since there's a kind of monopoly on it, right?
Right.
There's not a lot of places to go. But back in the day, you were able to leave and
Right.
go from area to area. You
Right.
wanted to be an independent, right?
Right.
Because if you wore out, you could make more money somewhere else, right?
Right.
So I guess that model just traveled along all this time. And then my question to you then, as being a leader of wrestlers, how come you didn't get the boys to unionize?
None of the boys would unionize. To this day, they would unionize.
Why?
Because some guys are making $6 million, some guys are making $300,000 or $150,000. Are you going to get the guy that was making? I mean, Jesse tried to do it with Hulk, right? And Hulk exposed him. You think a guy making $6 million is going to go along? No, they're not going to do it. But did you see Yang, the guy that ran for president, is getting involved in this? Once you get the federal government on your ass, and Vince McMahon beat the federal government on the Story trial, $32 million they spent, and he beat them. I hope they don't come and get him because they don't like to lose. So I'll give you a perfect example. A friend of mine, Phil Castanetti, got Ted Williams' ring from 1946 when the Red Sox won the pennant. And
But lost the World Series.
Yeah, lost the World Series to the great. He lost it to the Mad Dash with Enos Slaughter sliding across the plate.
Yeah, he's got a 300 lifetime batting average. He played for the New York Yankees, too, during the 1950s. Enos Slaughter.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Thank you.
Very good,
Go on.
very good.
I know exactly who he's talking about. Go on.
Country Enos Slaughter.
Country Enos.
Spiked Jackie going
Oh, he
first
was a
base.
he was a dirty player, from what I understand. Go on.
So,
but enough about that. We regress.
Yeah. So, what's going on is, my friend had that ring, and he went on to shows like this and showed the ring, and he got it from a guy that won it in a card game at a college card game. And the only guy that could have had that ring was Ted Williams' son, John Henry. I tried to get Ted on our show and talk about Goldberg for 30 seconds. Ted Williams was my hero. He wanted $150,000. I said, that ain't going to work for me, brother.
Was Ted able to talk for himself at this point?
No,
Because from what I understand, his son had him
like
holding his arm, signing bats in the basement.
Exactly.
That's what I heard. You know?
And his son died very young, so sometimes things work out for the
Yeah, he
best.
couldn't hit a curveball anyway. Go on.
Yeah.
I got you.
So,
bleeding hearts, the two of us.
Yeah.
The devil's in the room. You were saying?
So, when that happened, my friend was on the cover of Sports Illustrated and was talking about that ring. He'd been all over. John Henry called and said he stole the ring. He called John Henry and said, John Henry, if you want this ring back, I paid $2,000 for it. This is before the internet. You can get the ring for $2,000. John Henry told him he stole it. He went to court with his partner in it, right? They came up to the partner and said, you talk your Phil into doing this, we'll only give you 4 years. They were going to give him 25. Jeez. Phil said, I ain't going to do this. And they said, there's no chance you're going to win. They went to court. 45 minutes later, they were found innocent. 3 years later, I'm at Phil. We're in East Boston. He's Italian. We're eating some pasta. I'm looking at these people. They're looking at us across the table, and they got suits on. And Phil's family used to be in the gambling business in East Boston. And I said, Phil, do you know these guys? He said, no, but I know who they are. The guy came over 4 years later, put down a card, FBI, and said, we're watching you from the now until the day you die.
Wow.
So they don't like to lose. So I wish Vince the best of luck.
Wow.
That's heavy.
That's not very comforting.
We're almost out of
Sorry,
time here.
Vince.
This has been an incredible interview. Andrew, you got anything to promote coming up, brother?
Yeah, October 14th at the Lava Cantina at the Colony in Texas and right by Dallas. SWE Fury, the hottest wrestling promotion out there right now. And you got great talents like Brent McKenzie, heavyweight champion Tim Storm, Rodney Mack, and Jazz.
Do you talk to Tim Storm at all?
Occasionally. I want a shot at that belt, I'm trying to smooth my way into it, but he's a little scared of me, So, and best of luck to James Beard, one of the senior officials who has had some health problems. Looking forward to having him possibly ref that title match if Tim ever puts up or shuts up. And hopefully, we'll see what happens on October 14th and see where it leads. But November 7th, I'll be back again in San Antonio, Texas for SWE Fury. Go to SWEFury.com, check it out. And I'll be for UWF at the Atlanta Motor Speedway the 10th and the 11th of October also. So
you're kind of getting out of this COVID thing.
Listen to me, this whole weekend was great. Kevin and I, we wrestled in Rhode Island. I had a show. Kevin was signing. I wrestled in Rhode Island for NAW Extreme, or NWW Extreme, sorry, Trooper. NWW Extreme in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. I wrestled for them, and that was great to get out again. My second time since the whole lockdown. We did a bunch of signings at a Heroes Hideout up in Albany. It was a good time, really good weekend. Had a blast.
You guys did well.
Yeah, and then we're here. We're here at the Mecca of talk shows, the Monty and the Pharaoh show.
You hear that, Matt? Do you hear that?
This is the Mecca of talk shows.
And I'm having a psychic moment here, too. Oh, wait. If
Better-
you have us in your corner, you'll definitely win that belt against
Greater than Carson, better than Letterman. Move over, Leno. We got Monty and the Pharaoh. Double or nothing right there at that table.
Forgot to mention, uglier than Stern.
Well, that goes without saying.
Kevin, what do you got going on after you get home?
I have a podcast that's Taskmaster Talks. I want my friends to turn in and listen to it. Last week I had Eric Bischoff. I had Crowbar. And I think this week I'm having Ron Fuller on. And I have a T-shirt company to plug. It's called Double Hell. And they have multiple T-shirts of mine.
And mine, too, coming up.
Yeah, and I like to say this. I certainly appreciate being here. This is probably, and I'm not bullshitting, this was probably the best interview I've done. And I appreciate you guys.
Wow, Kevin, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
That means a lot to us.
Thank you.
We got into this just trying to entertain a few, and thanks to people like yourselves.
And thank you for
it's
your
been incredible.
career, too, because we grew up reading about you, and to have you in today is just one more dream come true for this show.
You
Thank you so
and
much.
I will
Thank
tell you, honestly, you are an icon in this business. In my opinion, you're probably in the top 3 bookers in the history of this business, and I put you ahead of Dusty Rhodes, right? So,
nice.
and I mean that from my heart.
Thank you.
I again, I know you're probably friends with Bischoff. I don't know him, but I will tell you that it must have been difficult working with him. So
we have become better friends after 20 years, and I understand what Eric went through. And after you look back at things, you can see how things happened for a guy that was thrown in that position at a very young age, and he was thrown. It was a guppy thrown into the shark pool.
Yeah.
Did pretty damn good there
And
for
he
a while
he did
too.
All right. But again,
Yeah.
I will say
Not
this
bad.
again. He
Not
had
bad.
you.
Yeah.
And that was pretty important.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't want to forget what a great wrestler you were. Remember, these are guys, we're just fans. We don't claim to be wrestling experts. We grew up. We remember the day we first saw you. Remember, we're Northeast guys, WWD guys. We're watching Florida Championship Wrestling.
Yep.
And if I could remember, I might be wrong. Correct me because I'm a little old.
Oh,
but isn't
you're a
that
little old?
I remember, I think the first
Hmm?
experience I had with you, and I could be wrong, but I think you hit Dusty Rhodes with a baseball. Is that possible? Not you?
I hit him with everything.
Yeah.
And he sold nothing. So,
And he sold nothing.
Maybe that was it. I got to tell you a quick story. One of my dearest of people that I had in my camp was Luna Vachon. And this was before she was Luna Vachon. And this is how heavy we got into mental things. And Gordon was the perfect person to play the part, okay? So Luna was going to give the Wrestler of the Year to Florida. It was down to Barry Windham or myself. Well, her name was Trudy at the time. And I said to her on the way out, I said, I'm going to have to slap you because you're going to give it to Barry. So, same thing. It was very, very close, but Barry Windham won in the closest thing. She handed him the thing. Barry walked off. I turned to her and I slapped her. When I slapped her, her legs went in the air, right? I walk off. I get back to the dressing room. Everybody's pissed at me, right? And she walks in and says, "Hey, you pussy, can't you slap any harder than that? I'm a Vachon." Okay, so now I'm suspended for TV for 2 weeks because I will not apologize to her. On the third week, I'm going to make an apology, and Gordon's there. The President of the United States is going to make me apologize. And he said, we're here at a very somber moment. Mr. Sullivan's here to apologize to Trudy. And she said, Mr. Sully, before you say anything, I'd like to address Mr. Sullivan. And Gordon says, you have every right to. Please go ahead. And she said, when you touched me, I had this warm feeling over my body that I had never had before. I had a tingling sensation that I never felt before. Will you allow me to follow you? And I said, and she was beautiful.
Right.
I said, well, you have to shave half your head. She said, I'll do anything for you. Gordon's face dropped.
Oh, my God.
Everybody saw her get her head shaved and said, this has to be real. No, we'd do that. And Luna was terrific, and I miss her to this day.
How about Purple Haze?
Purple Haze is 83 years old. He's squatting 405 for 10 reps.
Yep, Mark Lewin.
And he's doing, and I hate to say what his supplements are, but his supplements are A to Z. And that isn't vitamin A and zinc.
It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
He dabbles still.
Yeah.
He partakes of the cosmic cookie.
Yeah.
So,
want to remind fans out there that this Thursday coming up, we have former PWI writer Bill Apter in studio.
Just one thing.
Go ahead.
Want to give one shameless plug. Kevin and I on May 1st will be in the UK for World Pro Wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
We'll be wrestling in the UK for World Pro
I
Wrestling.
want to go to the UK.
I feel like
Don't take me anywhere.
I feel like there's some normality going on. It's
little
actually
bit-
making
little
me
bit
feel
coming up.
good.
Yeah.
Yep.
God bless. God bless.
Some normality.
So this Thursday we got Bill Apter in, and then we do not return until that following Friday where we have Marty Jannetty,
The Rocker. Okay.
the
Marty.
FBI,
Okay.
and then we finish off
with Tommy Rich.
With Tommy
With
Rich.
Tommy
Tracy
Rich.
Smothers.
Wildfire Tommy Rich,
Yeah, I got to throw in Tommy Rich.
and then we finish off with Barry Horowitz. But we also want to make a real quick special announcement. Nikita Koloff will be in studio October 24th. He'll be in an interview with us, and then we're going to do a virtual signing with Nikita. So that should be really good fun.
Staying busy.
I want to thank Andrew Anderson, Kevin Sullivan. What an honor.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Incredible. This has been Mike Monty.
This has been the Pharaoh. Until next time, later.